Greetings folks, and welcome to another episode of 81632-bit. As ever, I'm your host Rob, and today, as you've already seen, we're going to be looking at some great games for some failed systems. Now, if you want to know what I mean by a failed system, I'll just give you some names. 32X, 3DO, Atari Jaguar, Neo Geo Pocket Color, Atari Lynx. You get the picture? Now they are actually the machines we're going to be covering in this video, and what I'm going to do, I'm going to show a single game for each of those systems that I personally think is a brilliant little game and well worth playing. Now obviously these systems are failed systems, they're not easy to get hold of, and frankly there are ways of playing them where the legality of it is, shall we say, dubious. Emulation! Cough, cough! Anyway, I didn't say that. But without further ado, let's get on to the first of our games. So, the first system, as we can see here, is the Neo Geo Pocket Color. Now, the Neo Geo Pocket Color was a handheld released by SNK, and yeah, it failed. Although it did have some pretty solid support, especially from Sega, and frankly, this game is far better than it deserves to be. Sonic the Hedgehog Pocket Adventure, which is not, despite the title, a 2D take on Sonic Adventure. Rather, it's a take on Sonic 2. You know, the level layouts are almost identical. It's Sonic 2, but in your hand. Unlike obviously the Game Gear version, which was the Master System version, a fairly different game, this is basically Mega Drive Sonic 2 in the palm of your hand. And frankly, I think it looks and plays incredibly well. Sound is pretty good as well, but you know, because I don't want any copyright strikes, I'm not letting that be played. But look at it, this is a Sonic game, and it is amazing. It looks brilliant. This level of visual fidelity was not available on any other handheld really at the time, apart from the, by this point, long since dead Atari Lynx. But instead, here you go. It's Sonic 2. It plays really well. You know, the controls are quite tight. Yeah, the scrolling can be a little bit off at times, but you know, look at it. It's Sonic 2 and it is superb. So, you know, fire up that emulator and play the legal copy of the ROM that you own based on the fact that you have an actual cartridge of this, and give it a whirl. It's a great way to experience the game and a great way to introduce yourself to the system. So next up we have a game for my favourite failed system, the 3DO, and it's one of the pair of Advanced Dungeons and Dragons games that were released for the system, and it's AD&D Slayer. Now, this is quite a fun take on the RPG genre, and you know, at the time, the vast majority of RPGs that were played on consoles were played from that top-down perspective that we're so familiar with from titles like Phantasy Star, the Final Fantasy series, Dragon's Quest. This was something different. You got this really quite nicely done intro which really used the power of the 3DO system to show itself off, and you know, yes, it's a bit long, but at the time this was incredible. This was the kind of animation you didn't get on console games. Yes, if you had an Amiga or a decently spec'd PC, there were games out there by this point such as Day of the Tentacle, which really did give this kind of cinematic presentation, but on a console this was pretty unheard of, and this really was showing off the difference between the cartridge-based consoles of the 16-bit era and the fancy new CD-based consoles of the incoming 32-bit era. Yes, these days it all looks laughably basic, and realistically it is. It's simple low frame rate animation encoded in some blocky looking MPEG FMV, but at the time this was impressive, but it gets more impressive once we actually get into the game. Because as I said, most RPGs of the time, especially on consoles, were of that top-down variety, whereas this little bit of 3DO goodness does something entirely different. It goes for a Eye of the Beholder type 3D effect. This is Dungeon Master, but slightly different. Whereas in Dungeon Master, everything was done one step at a time, and there were some console versions. As you can see here, this is a real-time, three-dimensional viewpoint, and there's some fun stuff going on here. You've got a ceiling, which games like Doom often didn't have, because it is aping that viewpoint. You have windows in walls that you can see through to see what's in rooms, and it all moves at a pretty decent frame rate, to be honest. This is, for the 3DO, this is technically impressive, and it shows you what could be done if the right system, the right people were working with the system, and it plays really well. It's a real-time take on the classic AD&D game system, and yeah, if you've got a 3DO or a way to play 3DO games, again, I'm not saying the E word, but cough cough, then give it a whirl. It's well worth your time. So on we move to the Atari Jaguar, and for the Jag I have selected a game which many people may not have expected, because you think I'd want to show some kind of game like Aliens vs Predator that shows off the 3D power of the system, but the game I've actually picked is the Atari Jaguar version of the original Rayman, because frankly it's quite possibly the best looking 2D platform game of its era. Even today, the animation is absolutely stunning. This game looks beautiful, and I do mean beautiful. The colours, the animation, it all just comes together and presents this beautifully realised 2D world, which in its own way shows off the power of the Jaguar, because this was, quite honestly, leaps ahead of anything that the Mega Drive or the SNES could handle at the time. Even the 3DO, yes, it had its platform games, but Gex, fun as it is and well animated as it is, doesn't come close to this. This is a beautiful game, and not only is it a beautiful looking game, it sounds great and it plays brilliantly. If you're getting an Atari Jaguar, if you have access to the ability to play Jaguar games, this is an absolute must. If you don't play this, then I'm sorry. I'm going to say there's something wrong with you, because this is, without an inkling of a shadow of a doubt, the best game on the platform. End of. To me, it's that simple. There's no other way of saying it. Atari Jaguar, Rayman. This is 2D platforming perfection. Now, for Atari's handheld powerhouse, the Lynx, I've chosen Blue Lightning. Now, this was a release game for the system, and it did come from Epix, who really did have a handle on the system's hardware, given that they designed it. But this was a real showcase piece of software that came out when the system launched. In the late 80s, afterburner type aeroplane games were really popular. In the arcades, you had Afterburner, you had G-Lock. The home conversions of those were adequate, shall we say, depending on the platform, and what you would likely find on other handheld systems was massively basic in comparison, whereas here we had a game which right from day one showed off what the Lynx could do with its sprite scaling and it's beautifully done, full colour graphics, some pretty decent sound. You know, this is a real showpiece game, and it's from right there in that first batch of titles that were released. I remember my friend Gary, who had a Lynx, having this, and at the time this was just insane because I knew people who had Amigas. I had at this point, I think I was just about getting ready to get my Mega Drive. I definitely had a Master System. I had my Spectrum, so I'd played ports of Afterburner, but nothing like this. This was just, to a young boy at the time of what, 11 years old, 12 years old, this was an arcade in the palm of your hand, and frankly, it's still to this day a superb handheld experience, and it is the showcase game for the Atari Lynx. Again, if you've got a chance, play it. And now the 32X, our final system, and the game I've chosen is Dark Side. Now, straight away from that Sega logo, you can see that this is a game that is pushing this system and pushing it hard. Unlike most other 3D games on the 32X, Dark Side has texture mapped graphics. Most games on the system were quite happy to settle for flat shaded polygons, maybe some fancy backgrounds, but Dark Side went all in. You have got full textured polys there. Yes, the frame rate isn't great by modern standards and the draw distance isn't spectacular, but goddamn, this is what the 32X was really capable of in the hands of skilled programmers. But unfortunately, as is often the case with systems like the 32X, because they failed, we never really got to see this power really utilised by software. This was pretty much the only title of its ilk with the fully textured graphics, and it's a shame because it does show that the 32X was capable of an awful lot more than most of the software that was released for it implied. This is so easy to play through the E word, and it's well worth doing. Seriously, play it. It's fun, it's exciting, and it really shows off what could have been with Sega's 32-bit add-on. So there we have it, folks. There are 5 great games for 5 failed systems. I really do recommend you check these games out. They're all a huge amount of fun, and yeah, you know, they show why these systems didn't deserve the fate that history consigned them to. Now, as ever, I've been Rob. If you've liked this video, do hit the like button. If you've disliked it, hit the dislike button if you wish. Feel free to leave a comment down below. You know, subscribe to the channel if you've really enjoyed what you've seen, and if you've really enjoyed, ring the bell to be alerted when I upload a new video. You'll see all my socials on the end card, or in the description below. So until the next video, this is Rob saying so long.